Is bad work better than no work at all? The Handyman pros discuss why bad work can lead to unintended consequences that can be more aggravating and costly than doing no work at all. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition is entitled, Is Bad Work Better Than No Work at All? To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what have you been doing this week?
Well, greeting fellow Earthlings.
That's the end of the show, John.
I am here. What's been going on this week? Well, you know what? I had an interesting little job. Was installing some French doors in interior French doors to separate off a home office, which we had talked about before to create a home office.
Yep.
So for folks out there, you can go back and listen to the other podcast about things to think about in the home office. But when I was doing the French doors, that's two doors. If everybody out there knows what French doors are, two doors that close. And create one big opening. But it's always being very, very careful when you're hanging doors. I'm not talking about a hanging door show here, but the point of it is that be very careful to do a good job, because if you don't, especially when you're doing doors, they're not going to hang right, they're not going to look right, they're going to open by themselves, they're either going to close by themselves, they're going to bind, so there's a lot of things to think about. So it's always nice to do a really professional, good job, but to think these kind of jobs through. So when we were talking about this episode, Larry, we were kind of talking about all the things that we have kind of run across where we have followed up on some really bad work. And a lot of times that work wasn't even worth it.
Yeah, it actually created new problems that wouldn't have existed if they had not done the work at all. And I'm going to bring up an example in a little bit. This is not a door show, but I'm going to bring up an example of doors where I had a contractor come in and he was painting. And for whatever reason, he decided instead of unpinning the doors, meaning just taking the pins out of the hinges, he took the hinges off of the doors, which generally is not a problem. But when he went to put the doors back on, and I realized this after the fact, of course, I watched him do it, and I didn't really think anything of it at the moment. But this is, again, our show is about lessons learned, part of it, and saving time, money, and aggravation. Well, here's the aggravation I went to. He put the doors back on with an impact gun. Didn't think a thing about it till I went to put the doorknobs back on the door. I was putting new hardware on the doors. I put them on, and all of a sudden, the doors don't shut right. And I'm like, why are all of these doors came off. They were all working properly, right? I go to put them back on, and I realized that 3/4 of the screws that were holding the doors on were stripped out in the wood. The wood was stripped out. And then I'm like, oh, he used an impact gun.
Right.
And I'm like, instead of using a drill or and putting them in carefully, he went zip and then zip, and it just pulled all the wood out. Well, folks, if you don't know this, these were interior doors. Hollow core doors are made out of, John, would you say it's the best wood in the world?
No,
junk.
I would not.
Yeah, it's junk. And so it's really
they look good, but they're not. Yeah, they're not that durable.
Right, and they're not super durable. So this, from being a simple job, this became a major repair for me, and I ended up replacing some of the doors. And of course, I charged the contractor back because I'm like, dude, you did this, I didn't do this. In fact, a couple of the doors were brand new pre-hung doors that I had actually installed. They were perfect, right? Because John and I don't do lousy work; we do great work. Door was perfect. Well, one of these doors, when it was perfect, of course, it didn't swing. Well, now it swings open. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! It's a brand new door. Anyway. Those are the things that we're trying to say. Is bad work better than no work at all? So sometimes, and again, to John's point, if you're doing them DIY, take your time. Anyway, let's talk about some other stuff, John. Let's talk about some of our jobs that we've seen where we've gone in to fix bad work.
So let me go through let me unpack a couple of things that we've done and what the result is. And when we say, doing some bad work is better than no work at all, a lot of times we followed in some people that had done just really lousy work. Okay. And what this resulted in was when they tried to sell the house, and the house was up for sale, and when they tried to sell it, none of it would pass inspection. Okay, so not only did that homeowner pay for that lousy work, now he had to go back and pay for it again to get it fixed so it would pass inspection. Was the guys had put flooring, a thin flooring over an exposed old plumbing hole in the kitchen where maybe an island was, and there was like a 2-inch pipe coming up, and they just put the flooring over it. So you step on the flooring, you can feel that hole. So they never fixed it. I think the inspector caught that. They had the wrong plumbing parts in on a P trap. They used flex tube for a P trap. That wasn't going to pass. They actually had a vent that was one of the main vents in the house, the plumbing vents that was terminated.
It was
the septic vent that was terminated in the attic. So they didn't even connect the rest of the piping that went through the roof, through the attic and through the roof. They just left it disconnected. It was really a comedy of errors in that place, and I kind of felt bad for the guy. He was an absentee homeowner that was trying to get rid of this home, but that work, kind of going back to the title of the show here, is that bad work was better than no work at all in that case.
Yeah,
because you aggravate it and pay for it twice.
Wasn't this the one where they shot a siding nail through the electrical wire?
Yeah. So that was something where one of the fuses kept popping.
Right.
And I think the inspector caught that. And, we couldn't figure out why that kept popping. We chased down that wire. We had, what's kind of known as a fox and a hound, it puts a tone in the wire, and we're chasing down the wire through the walls from the breaker box, and can't find it. It was really weird because it would just stop when it hit a certain place.
And then we looked outside.
We couldn't figure it out. We couldn't figure it out until we really got in there, and then sure enough, that the nail went right through the wire. And of course, shorted out the wire. So once again, it was a lot of these things where the place wasn't wired correctly, and the GFCIs wouldn't work, and they try to sell the place, but the inspector's like, no, you're not. So these are kind of the lessons learned on bad work.
Yeah, and actually, it was that house, John, that actually caused us to do our 3 shows on hiring a contractor, if you'll remember. So, folks,
that's right.
Yeah, if you go back into because this fellow, unfortunately, he hired 2 separate general contractors to do this job. So we actually came in. We were the 3rd contractor group in that facility, and that's what we found after 2 other guys had been in there, 2 other GCs. We weren't reckoning as a GC. We were there to fix the problems on the inspection reports. And the problems on the inspection reports were, I specifically remember shaking my head going, you've got to be kidding me. Like, you pay, and he paid a boatload of money for this.
Yeah, he paid a boatload of money, which resulted in legal action and everything else, So, lessons learned on bad work, and for all you folks out there that are having work performed, make sure that it's done correctly.
Yeah, it's just amazing. So anyway, so there's 3 shows out there called How to Hire a Contractor or Hiring a Contractor. If you're interested in those, please go back and listen. But that house, because John, you and I worked on that house together, and that house was the reason that we sat there in there. We're like, we've got to do this. This is crazy. This is nuts. Mm-hmm. He paid, many, many, many tens of maybe $100,000 for those two contractors, and they still ended up paying us another. I don't remember. It was a lot.
I don't know
it was
either.
a lot, but it was a bunch. We were there for what, a week, 2 weeks? I don't know. Or
No, we were there for more than that. That was a month. That was almost a month to redo a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and so this is a case where really, no work would have been better than the work they did. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was just unbelievable. We've run into other work like that. Like I was doing a house, and I swear, this guy, no kidding, he had a fetish for caulk, right? I mean, there's an old saying, get it close. What is it? Caulk the rest.
Yeah. Do your best, caulk the rest.
Do your best, caulk the rest, right? Yeah. This guy had caulk. I mean, I took gobs of caulk out. I swear they were bigger than my fist. I'm like, so there's do your best, caulk the rest, and then there's like, why don't you use like what you're supposed to use, not just fill the hole with caulk, Yeah. But and while you think, oh, what's the big deal there? It's like, well, it actually caused problems because caulk does not cut like wood, and so trying to get that freaking monstrous piece of caulk out, it took me a long time. I had to actually dig it out with a screwdriver and a pair of pliers, and then dig it out and dig it out and dig it out because I had to get in behind it to actually get something attached to it. Anyway, it's one of those sometimes, and we say this to you as people out there, for if you're going to do DIY trips, take your time. You don't need to overdo things. Think things through, right? Of course, use your resources, right? Understand there's a million resources out there. Of course, there's the Handyman Pros radio show, but you can YouTube things. You can do all of that stuff. Really resource this, think it out, and take a look at it and just do it, John, do you have any other examples of where you wish somebody hadn't worked on a place?
Well, that's a good way to put it. You wish that somebody wouldn't, there's been plenty of times, that it's like, dude, please, you shouldn't have even stepped in here. I mean, I really regret it. I mean, Larry, I know that you had worked on, there's just some things that people will put in your house, and I know that you've got a cabinet. One of your clients has a nice house, and they had lousy cabinets that were installed, and the contractor didn't put all the hardware on correct.
Yeah, he used basically. So this is we're in a very, very affluent area of Atlanta, a very affluent area. These are all, everything's over $1 million, everything in the neighborhood. And this house is beautiful. I love the house. I love the layout. I really do. I think it's amazing. But he calls me in to adjust his cabinets, and I'm like, okay, I'll adjust the cabinets. Well, in the adjustment of the cabinets, I find out that like 3/4 of the handles are loose, right? So all the things that you pull the cabinets and open the cabinets and the drawers as well. The drawer pulls are all loose, and that is a pet peeve of mine. I will tell you, I hate grabbing a handle and have it be loose, right? Because I know that every time, because you do that a lot, every time you do it, you get wear and it throws things out of whack. So I go to try to tighten this stuff up, and it's the same deal. I turn the screws in to tighten them up, and of course they're all stripped out. And I'm like, wow, okay. Then I pull it up, and again, this is a house that was built less than 5 years ago, and it's a very, very expensive. These are custom cabinets, and I mean custom cabinets. They're very tall, and I look in it, and it's pressboard. It's melamine and pressboard, and I'm like, oh my God, just it's one thing if you're doing a standard size cabinet, but this was all custom work in a very fine, high quality, beautiful house in a very expensive. And I'm just like, wow. There's a time when you buy good materials, and this was an example of when you needed to buy good materials. And unfortunately, I told the homeowner, I said, look, I've done the only repair that I know how to do with this, which is I shot some glue in and tighten it up. I said, but the next time it's probably going to pull the cabinets apart. And so I said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it means you're going to have to redo your doors, because there's just nothing for the screws to grab a hold of. There's just nothing left. It's all ground out.
Yeah, and just know, folks, things like that. And I think you have to understand, if you use that melamine and that press board in any wet areas, you're probably asking for trouble too.
Yeah, it's not. It's just not.
Not
the best option.
I have been in a lot of beautiful homes that were $1 million and so on, and they're using that kind of stuff for boards, next boards and cabinets and things next to the flooring. That the dog, if the one place the dog's bowl was right next to it, well, the dog is slopping water all over it. Well, all this stuff is coming apart, and it's just it's awful.
And sadly, I think what people don't understand is I was in another client of mine's home, and again, this is a very nice home, and they actually had me assemble some cabinets for them, and this company is fantastic, and if people want, they can send me an email. I'll send you the name of them. I'm not endorsing their particular product, but as I'm putting these cabinets together, I realized that they're using actually very, very fine plywood covered with melamine. So they were all, it was 1/2-inch plywood, and it actually was really fine-grained plywood. So I know it was very expensive plywood. I can, you know how you can tell, right? So, I mean, I could tell that this was very expensive plywood covered with melamine, and I put those cabinets together, and folks, that was like working with real wood cabinets. It was magnificent. There was no slop. There was no, you didn't worry about the screw pulling out because it didn't, and you're still careful with that. Do not use an impact gun, to my earlier story, right? Do not use an impact gun. But I'm using the drill and just zink, and it goes in and it's tight and it's firm and it felt great. And I know those cabinets were expensive, but it's a case where the extra money is worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So and that's very true. You can't lie here about trying to put you got to put nice products in nice homes.
Right.
I mean, there's just no getting around it.
Yeah, and so this show is actually called, is bad work better than no work at all? But it's a double-edged sword, right? So you can do the work and you can do a great job on the work, but if you use the wrong materials, does it matter? Well, no, it becomes bad work, right? So that's right. The point of this conversation is that you do have to be cognizant of what you're putting on. What's the old phrase, John? We're trying to put lipstick on a pig, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Be aware of that when you're out there, and two, if you're looking at homes and you're a first time over, be aware of flippers. Flippers are notorious for putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, they will cut corners and use the cheapest materials and so forth and so on. And just be aware. It's all we're saying, right? I mean, we're just trying to be aware. Any other tips or anything, John?
Well, I would just say, yeah. I mean, I think kind of the moral of the story here is that for all you DIYers and all that, when you're doing this stuff yourself, and even if you hire somebody to do something, kind of make sure you take your time, you understand what this process is, you understand what the materials are that they're going to last, and if it costs you a couple more dollars to make it last, then that's the way you do it. Then make sure that it gets installed correctly, because if it doesn't, then bad work is better than no work at all. And, you're kind of going to be back to, I got to redo this again. Maybe not right now, but maybe in a year. It can be very aggravating to do it. I mean, some of the things that my builder did in the house, I kind of wish he didn't even, do it. He would have been better off if he would have just said, hey, John, you know what? I really suck at this, so why don't you do it? And I would have had a lot less aggravation. Yeah. Okay. I'm just telling you, I'm telling you straight up how it is. And that's kind of where, I've always learned, do it right, because it really can turn out to be a real mess. And I was very aggravated, and it took me a lot of time, and I had to buy it again. Right.
Yeah, but, and with contractors, we're big about check them, check their work, check them again, check their work. Yep. Don't assume anything. And then the last thing, and again, these are in part of our Hiring a Contractor series, but make sure they have some sort of warranty and some sort of business, longevity in business. Make sure they've been around for a while, because it's notorious, as we've said so many times, they come, they go, and they're out of business, and then you're standing there. Back to my story about the cabinet doors. this fella says, he says to me, he goes, yeah, I've tried contracting my contractor, but he's out of business. He said, so what do I do? And I said, there's not much you can do, you know.
Yep.
What
You're on your own.
All right. Well, folks, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, if you have an idea for us, please don't hesitate to contact us. Send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. We'll work. You can leave us a message at our website. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. Join our Facebook group at Handyman Pros Radio. You can leave us a voice message. You can do all that kind of thing. John, you talked about aliens at the beginning of the show. I saw one last night coming down. Did you see that one?
Your fellow alien? Was he green?
Alien.
Your fellow alien?
Well, all I know is his ship landed, and guess what? What are you doing this afternoon? Because we've got a project. We got to take that bad boy apart.
Did he do it right?
We're going to do it right, by God.
Okay. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.